Welcome, everybody. Here with us today is psychotherapist Shonda Moralis. Shonda is on a mission to help high performing women navigate what she calls the messiness of midlife so they can keep playing big without burning out. And from what I've researched about you, there are so many parts to what you're doing that really resonate pretty powerfully with me. And I'll just touch upon a few and then we can take it from there. But number one, being that I'm a mindfulness teacher, I love that you are incorporating mindfulness into your work as a psychotherapist, both explicitly and implicitly. I love that you work with high performing women because being a high performing woman myself, I feel like if we can learn these resources that can keep us going and playing hard, then all the better. And you help women to navigate what you call the messiness of midlife so that they can keep playing big without burnout. And burnout is such a prevalent area, or I should say something that is so common in so many industries where people are dealing with high pressure issues and are so strapped for time. So all of that really resonated pretty powerfully with me. So I just wanted to see, well, first I want to welcome you before we move. I'm so anxious to hear what you have to say that I'm leaving out the most important part of welcoming you, but welcome to this episode. I'm so grateful to have you here as my guest. But I'm curious how you, in having mentored women for 25 years, how you came to focus on this niche.
Right. So probably like a lot of people, it's a very windy story, but to
Yeah.
try to consolidate, as a therapist, I started practicing yoga, seriously, Ashtanga yoga back in, not as a therapist, but I was a therapist for a long time. And then in 2000, I started practicing Ashtanga yoga seriously. And I think for the most part, that was my introduction to some movement, some mindful movement, and meditation and Shavasana at the end. So I was hooked right away. I loved that, was serious about that. A few years later, I came across mindfulness-based stress reduction, doing some reading for work as a therapist. And I thought, wow, this really hits kind of the awareness slash heart piece of therapy that tends to get missed with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is usually was the gold standard. And so I dove into researching that, went to my local hospital and went through their 8-week program, and was hooked right away because at that time, so I have two kids that are 10 years apart. My daughter was maybe 3 at that time. And I was noticing I was patient. I'm definitely like a get it done kind of person, type A, recovering, all of that stuff. And I was slowing down a tiny bit, but feeling more efficient, feeling more present, just happier, more relaxed, patient
Yeah.
with her. So I was hooked. So I went through some training. I ended up teaching in that program at the hospital for about 5 years and incorporating mindfulness into my practice as a therapist as well, because it can just inform so much of what we're doing. And then to fast forward, I had a half an hour mindfulness practice every morning, very, very strict about that for myself. And then I'm pregnant with my son when my daughter's about to turn 10. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be meditating for a half an hour every day with a newborn. So
Yeah.
how do I keep this in my life in a way that's practical and flexible? And so I started coming up with these 5-minute practices that I call mindful breaks, which sometimes are meditation, what we think of, but sometimes it's just how do I get back into more awareness in the present moment and with these mindful breaks. And so I started teaching them to moms that I was working with, and that turned into my first book called Breathe Mama Breathe. And then my second book is more about life balance, and that's a loaded word for some people, but I believe life balance is definitely possible. It's about our definition of life balance, so we can go into that. Um, but each of those books contain dozens of different mindful breaks and that's something that's really important to me is how do we make this really accessible for anyone and everyone so that it's, whether it's you have no background and you just want a taste of it, then you start to get a taste and you're like, ooh, I kind of like this. And how do I build upon it? Or for some people, that's enough and that's fine. But that I would love everyone to have a taste of this in a way that's possible. And then as I started to move into my 40s and 50s and going through perimenopause, that was an adventure in and of itself till I realized it took like 7 or 8 years till I realized what was happening with my body and that I
Yeah.
was in menopause. And so now I'm focused on that phase of life for women primarily because I think we don't have enough information, even though it's being talked about a whole lot more now, that we still don't know what's happening a lot of times until like it kind of wallops us in the face, if
Yeah.
at all. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It in many ways reminds me of my mindfulness journey, and it sounds like it was a very organic unfolding where your
Mm,
personal practice just organically weaved itself into your professional world. I had a similar experience where about 10 years ago, from the work that I was doing as a litigator, I speaking about balance, I was so imbalanced both in my professional and personal lives. I had a toddler, I had a newborn, and handling a full caseload, I didn't have a way to stay in the present. When I was at home with my children, I was worrying about what needed to get done in the office, what deadlines there were to make sure I complied with. And when I was at work, I was thinking about what had to be taken care of for the kids or how I
right.
wasn't present with the kids. So what I find in sharing mindfulness within the legal sector, in particular, because that's the sort of niche area based on my having worked in that field for so long, is that many people, given the demands of their lives, whether it's their personal lives or all they have to juggle in their professional roles or together, the combination, they don't have the time. They don't have the time necessarily to commit to the formal programs and the time that is demanded of them for those programs. But to your point, 5 minutes, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, those 5 minutes can have the most profound impact on us as parents, like stepping out of reactivity or feeling hugely impatient to the point where we're going to lash out and say something or do something we'll later regret, but to give ourselves the permission and the gift to just be for a few moments even, that makes all the difference in how we respond in that moment and the following moments. So I love that you created something for other parents and other professionals that is accessible, it's practical, and from a time perspective, it's not going to make or break. Well, it will make you. It won't break you, but
We
it will
hope, yeah.
make you a more patient and kind person. So
Yeah.
I love that. I do also really like how you give voice to the fact that it's still sort of like an unknown that the transition for women going into experiencing perimenopause or menopause is such a it still feels like there's like you're in the dark in
Mm,
as someone who's 48 years old. I can say that it takes a lot of sort of digging to find information, and then when you do find some information, there's so many conflicting pieces of
right.
information. So it's
Yes.
a very dizzying time, all the while as you're actually experiencing pretty significant physical, psychological changes. I can understand how mindfulness can so beautifully complement the
Mm,
experience that we as women go through. It's completely natural, but it feels so unfamiliar and as if we're in the dark. I do think there's a little bit of a change, and maybe you can speak to this point now compared to 10 years ago. I do think there's more and more conversation about it. For example, just last week, my mom my mom called and said, "Hey, did you see the show that Oprah Winfrey's doing?" And I saw it had Halle Berry, and I think it was Naomi Watts and Maria Shriver. And so there is more attention being placed on perimenopause and menopause, but it's still newer, I think, in the big scheme of things. So have you noticed a difference, say now, as compared to maybe 10, 15 years ago when you started exploring this area?
Right. Well, I didn't start exploring this area until I'd say maybe 4 years ago.
Or
So
okay.
yeah, something like that. So I don't really know, but my guess is that it's definitely exploded in the past few years. I mean, that's the past year or two, I think it's really exploded, and just the number of books that are on the market and influencers and so forth. And when Oprah picks something up, of course, that makes an
Yeah.
impact. Um, yeah, and so I hear both sides. I think we're doing a Pennsylvania menopause conference that's happening. Well, I don't know when this will go to air, but
Mhm.
in May, and we still will have people say, "Why are you talking about this?" That women will say that, kind of
Really?
like, "Yeah, yeah," which is surprising to me, but maybe I shouldn't be surprised. So I think there's still stigma attached to it. It's
Yeah.
becoming less and less. But 100%, there's so much information out there. I think that it is dizzying and confusing. And I've created a 7-week program that really I distilled all of this information. It's reviewed by my local OBGYN who is a menopause specialist, and it's on nutrition and exercise and stress reduction and what's happening in our bodies and treatments. It's all of the things that I honestly took a couple of years to research and figure out for
Mhm.
myself, because it is wading through all of this conflicting information and trying to get, evidence-based, because unfortunately there's misinformation still being,
Yeah.
continuing to be out there. So,
Yeah, and even for myself, I've consulted, from four medical doctors to some holistic practitioners. You get a whole gamut of different
yes.
recommendations from dietary to medical to actual procedures and medications. So it's a very dizzying time, but one that I'm hopeful that as more and more research is conducted, that just like mindfulness, we're going to see a growth in this area. And speaking of mindfulness, I love that you're highlighting the role that it can play in perimenopause. Being someone who's like you, I'm a huge fan of yoga, and the practice has helped me to be more connected to the body. I feel like, especially in the work that I did as a lawyer, we have a tendency to spend so much time in our heads that oftentimes when I was in a class and the instructor would direct our attention to a certain part of the body and invite us to contract muscles or do this or do that, it was so foreign to me.
Mhm.
And through yoga and in the last 10 years, mindfulness practice, I've been able to feel into the body more and to really be aware, especially during certain times of my cycle, what comes up for me within the body. So for me, that awareness piece is huge because I can honestly say that there's a different way I need to carry the body, so to speak,
Mm.
or certain things that just don't really agree with the body. And that ability to connect with that insight, that sort of wisdom that I can gain from the body has deepened because of my mindfulness practice. Do you see other ways that mindfulness plays a role in helping women to better manage the symptoms associated with perimenopause or menopause?
Oh, yes. Where to start? So, I mean, something as simple as a hot flash, right? I mean, it's a uncomfortable, you know, uh, situation that's happening. You're sweating, you feel like you're kind of on fire from the inside, and depending on where you are and what's going on, I mean, you could be in front of work giving, litigating, and you have
Yeah.
a hot flash and you start sweating bullets, like, um, And so we add, of course, we know we add all these extra layers onto, or we talk about, the second arrow, the third
Yeah.
arrow. So it's like the situation itself unpleasant. Then we start thinking, oh my gosh, everyone is looking at me. Everyone sees that I'm soaked through with sweat. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, now I can't think. I can't think of what I was saying. I lost my train of thought. And this is so embarrassing. And on we go, versus when we have a mindfulness practice, we might be able to catch and say, oh, I see what's here. I can
Mhm.
notice the body sensations. We learn how to kind of give that space, allow it, which doesn't mean we love it,
Right.
but it's happening, it's here. And can I relax into that? And that is a practice that we can really develop. So, that sort of working with unpleasant sensations or situations or thoughts, emotions for that matter.
Yeah.
Um, even body acceptance. That is a
Mhm.
huge thing I hear during this transition time is women will say, I haven't changed a thing. I'm working out, I'm eating healthy, and all of a sudden either I've put weight on or it's just shifted around in interesting new places.
Yeah.
And women can have a lot of, angst around that or, all kinds of feelings. And so again, this awareness of what is under my control, what is not
Yeah.
under my control, how much do I want to try to control that? How much energy and
Right.
effort do I put into this or not? And then, this compassion piece, of course, that comes with mindfulness of that kind attitude toward ourselves, toward the situation, toward what we don't love, but it's part of it.
Yeah, you mentioned control. It can feel like it's out of your control that
Yeah.
as women who control and manage a lot, it can be that much more heavy, that much more weight that we feel, I mean, not the weight of the body, but just
Mm,
more to juggle, but it can feel overwhelming because we only are in so much control. But I know in my personal experience, I haven't experienced hot flashes, but I do notice that the my experience with anxiety,
mm,
that there is a definite, notable uptick in my anxiety levels, and I even notice my ability to focus, just
mm,
the brain fog.
mhm,
It can stir up even more anxiety because you're feeling out of control. But when you can, with mindfulness, kind of put it in its place, kind of
mm,
understand and give yourself a little bit of grace. Again, not saying that we necessarily like this, but can we allow what is here? Can we hold space for what is here to be rather than fighting our experience because
right.
it's what's happening? So I really love that you recognize that and the compassion piece. There's something that I've been practicing in my own life that you may know of, Kristen Neff and Chris Germer, the self-compassion break. It's been really supportive because for me at least, when I experience higher levels of anxiousness and say I have to give a presentation and here I'm about to speak about mindfulness and finding balance and feeling more
Right.
relaxed, and I'm anything but that. I'm just
Yep.
like a ball of knots, and I know that it's hormonal. To validate it, to just acknowledge that this is what's here right now.
Mhm.
It's not like there's something wrong with me or that I'm regressing as a mindfulness teacher, but can I validate what's here? And can I recognize that this is part of the human condition, that other women just like me, hundreds, millions of women are going through this, and what is it that I can offer myself in this moment to be kind, to be compassionate to what I'm experiencing because it doesn't feel very good, but what can I give myself to support myself with what's here?
Mm,
And that really, again, it doesn't make everything go away, but rather than, as you mentioned, the second arrow, like shooting ourselves with the second arrow and creating more suffering, just that little touch, just that light touch of mindfulness is what can help take things down a notch, can kind of soften, even just softening the muscles or a few relaxing sighs. It can help me to get out of my head, not to have to buy into all of the stories or the inner critic, and to be more present for whatever it is, if I'm giving a presentation or I'm out with friends. So I love the compassion piece, and to just really acknowledge that we may not like it, it may not feel great, but how can we support ourselves to be with what is natural and what is here?
Yeah. And the control piece again, like you were saying, it's so the resisting, right? So it's like we're not trying to resist. That's that allowing piece. And so when we're talking about something like perimenopause or these symptoms or anxiety, I think it's twofold at least, which is again, what's under my control and do I want to get treatment? And I always talk to women about, I think especially women, we're so used to, kind of gritting our teeth, muscling through situations, we tough it out. That's what we've always done, and we just do it and we get it done.
Yeah.
But we don't need to suffer so much
Yeah.
with some of these symptoms if they're impacting your functioning. They don't have to be like someone will say, like, well, I don't know, is it that bad? I don't know if it's that bad, but I don't know why does it have to get to that bad? Or we see it as a character flaw. I talk about the comparison piece, number one, but I talk about perimenopausal duck syndrome, which is, if you've heard of duck syndrome, where above the surface, I look like I have it all together. I'm getting all the things done. But
Yeah.
under the surface, I am paddling for my life. I am barely
Mm.
keeping my head above water. What used to take effort, now takes so much effort and energy. Kind of like you're saying, like maybe before you got up and you gave a talk and you were like, okay, I'm nervous, but whatever. Now it's like, oh, I need to really like work through this. It's a thing, all this extra effort and energy to get
Yeah.
to the baseline where I was before. That happens a lot during the perimenopause transition with our hormones fluctuating so much. And so we look around at everyone else and it's like, well, she has it all together. She's doing it. What's wrong with me that I'm
Mhm, mhm.
having such a struggle just keeping my head above water? And
Yeah.
so that's what we don't want. And that's why it's so important. And I'm, so passionate about having these conversations so we recognize and normalize this can feel really intense. And a symptom that's really common too is called not feeling like myself, which
Yes.
is quite nebulous, but you go, yeah, like when like you just don't feel like yourself and you're like, what is happening? Who am I? I don't recognize myself. And that's very jarring when we have had, maybe more control or maybe more, we just figure things out in our lives. And all of a sudden
Mhm.
it feels like, I don't know if I can figure this one out. Or it's
Yeah.
feeling like I'm barely figuring this one out.
I find myself thinking, wow, I did not know I have that side of me. Like there's a part where hormones just feel like there's rage, and I'll
Yep.
be in the kitchen and I'll just say something to my husband, or one of my kids will do something and I'm like, woof. That was not a skillful thing to say or do on my end, but it's just, yeah, it's surprising. I have moments where I don't recognize that part of myself. But I do
Mhm.
think that in terms of recognizing and awareness, that what's so interesting about the time when it seems that perimenopause kicks in is just taking in the whole life picture, where we as women tend to be, a lot of us, we may be mothers, and so we're juggling a child or children, and we have those stressors to deal with. And on top of taking care of children, we may have elderly parents or grandparents, and so we're juggling in that. And then many of us are working, like we're doing
Mhm.
it all, and we're not in the same job roles as we were when we were maybe in our 20s or
Right.
even our 30s. We tend to have more senior roles. So when you combine all those different angles with what's physically taking place in the body, it makes perfect sense. But again, I think because we have not been in it so long, in terms of it, the stigma being taken away and the conversation growing, that at times it can feel very alone, and it can feel as if like the walls are closing in on us.
Mm.
But speaking to people like you and knowing that there's really helpful resources that we can incorporate into our lives, that's pretty empowering. And I think it gives us a sense of agency when so much of our lives maybe feels a bit out of control or a lot out of control.
Mhm.
I know for me, one that has been really helpful is knowing when I'm starting to feel some of that overwhelm or more a deeper level of anxiousness is to try and schedule out my day where, again, this doesn't all, like sometimes you just by the nature of your kids' schedules or your work demands, you have presentations, you have events you have to take your kids to and from. But when we can kind of map out our calendars to be more gentle to ourselves
Mhm.
during those moments or those periods of each month where we know things are heightened, that has been really helpful. Or even I really love to work out, but in those moments when I'm feeling more stressed out or having more physical symptoms, scaling back a bit, maybe not doing that like intense boot camp, maybe doing some more restorative yoga. So that again, coming back to mindfulness and how we can use it to support ourselves during transition, for me, it's been like really beneficial.
100%. I was going to say exactly what you said. And I talk to women about that a lot is kind of, can you, I break it down even further. So 5 minutes is great, but if you the only feel like to start, if you could only manage to sit up in your bed and take 3 deep inhales and exhales, like,
Yeah.
and then check in and ask kind of gauge what's up today. Like, what am I craving? What am I needing? Again, I may not have time that day to take care of that. Maybe it's rest, maybe it's adventure, maybe, whatever it is, but I'm aware of it. And I'm going to then deliberately try to find or create some time in the next week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, to get some of that. So we're just taking the pulse, kind of, checking our temperature, in
Yeah.
terms of what we're craving, what we're needing, and 100%, especially during perimenopause, but physically, I know my energy would be like, I love to work out as well. And it would be like, might even feel good during the exercise session, but then I would be exhausted or get sick. So I
Yeah.
really had to manage my immune system was
Yeah.
really compromised during that time. And that's hard when you're used to, that's a stress reduction practice for you. And all of a sudden, you have to modify that. So again, this all works together,
Yeah.
supports. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying to my husband, I went on a run in the area where we live, and it wasn't like a crazy run, but it was a little bit more challenging because it was hilly. And during it, I was feeling great. The body felt good. My foot wasn't bothering me. My muscles felt loose, and it came back pretty good. And then it was different later in the day. I noticed some fatigue, what I could usually be fine with, and it would
Right.
actually recharge me. Certain times of the month, it can really drain me and leave me
Yes.
feeling like I'm depleted. So again, it's just the check in to notice what's here in this moment. It's not to say it's going to be like this every day. It may not
Mm.
be like this tomorrow. Maybe it wasn't like that yesterday, but that's what's here now. So in seeing the inner landscape, so to speak, of what's here, how can we, that's what allows us to know how to care for ourselves in that
Mm.
moment, that day. So check-ins, I really think that check-ins can be hugely supportive. Speaking of supporting ourselves, I have a question for you because it's something that, back in the day, maybe you were told to take a multivitamin, like in your, or you want your hair to be healthier, so you take biotin. But are there any supplements or dietary recommendations that for someone who is my age, they're, mid 40s to mid 50s, that can support the body and the mind in what it is we go through?
So supplements, there hasn't been a whole lot of research, and I'm definitely not. I don't take any supplements myself. For me, menopause hormone therapy was an absolute lifesaver because I was having night sweats up to 8 times a night. So I was not sleeping and yeah, I couldn't function. It's not for everyone, but it can be really beneficial if you're having certain symptoms. And so there are a lot of treatment options. I mean, primarily lifestyle would be get probably things you hear, which is more protein than we probably think we need. Um, we definitely need to eat some carbs. So if you're an exerciser, the recommendation for exercise changes for women during perimenopause transition. And it's really important. A lot of us have been like, well, I'm just going to get up, I go do my run on an empty stomach or whatever it is. And then, but we have to fuel our exercise half an hour before, within a half an hour before and a half an hour after, we need to eat some protein for sure. And I think we don't tend to do that. I think we underfuel ourselves. Well, I know we do. That's what the research shows for
Yeah.
women who are more exercisers. So, nothing necessarily across the board, lifting weights, body resistance, flexibility, range of motion, all of those things, balance, of course. And, but definitely we lose muscle and bone. And so that's super important that we want to be lifting weights, and heavy if possible. So some women are, uncomfortable with that, but finding a trainer, somebody who could at least get you started with good form and then figuring out what works for you.
Awesome. Okay. And just in terms of another layer of support, I know you mentioned one of your books, and is the second book, Don't Forget to Breathe? Is that, I have here, I, correct me if I'm wrong. I have that one here, and then you mentioned a second, or the first book that you mentioned earlier.
Breathe, Mama, breathe.
Breathe, Mama, Breathe. Okay. I just want to
Yeah.
share with listeners if they're interested in reading and finding out more, which books or book you recommend.
Yeah, so Breathe Mama Breathe is geared more toward moms with little ones, and it's more about the mothering and how do we care for ourselves, and the parenting piece. And Don't Forget to Breathe is more about life balance and how what I define life balance as a gentle, ongoing recalibration of our priorities over time. So for me, it's, people will say there's no such thing as balance, but depends on our definition. I think it's
Yeah.
ever evolving, and that it's homeostasis. Really, our body always wants to go back to homeostasis. It's not perfection. We don't get there and stay there. It's this ongoing sort of recalibration. And so I have different mindful breaks in there that help if we need to help be more calm, more awareness. There are mindful breaks for more confidence and assertiveness, and then there are mindful breaks for balance. And so we kind of pull out and use what's more needed in that moment or that time. So, yeah.
Okay. And then is there, I jotted one more book. Is it Hot in Here? Is that your third?
No, no.
No? Okay.
Mm-mm.
I had
That's
that
not
here.
me.
Maybe I'm making that up, but
That was a talk I gave called Hot in Here that I gave a talk, a webinar.
okay.
Maybe that's where you saw that. Yeah,
Okay.
and I have an online group program called Reclaim Midlife. So that starts May 21st is the next cohort. And it's a small group and we meet live virtually once a week for 7 weeks. And there's a topic each week. We dive into perimenopause and how do we integrate ambition and ease during perimenopause, because sometimes ambition goes to the wayside and we don't recognize that either.
Okay, I'm glad I made that up as a book because now we
Yeah,
have one more
yeah.
piece of information for listeners and viewers. So before we close, I just wanted to ask you a question. If somebody is new to mindfulness or they're new to the experience of transition and they're feeling overwhelmed and they're looking to, again, I know balance is interpreted differently by different people, but if they want to find more balance or more ease in their lives, what's one small step that you recommend they explore?
I would say guided meditation, find a guided meditation that you can hop in, set up that habit, same time every day, and make that a priority and just experiment and have fun with it and see what happens. And
Mhm.
there's no like not good at it or, I didn't have a good one. It just play with it and have fun and just see what happens. And I always tell people to experiment with that.
I like how you say to have fun. I think we take ourselves so serious
Oh,
and we
yes.
try to do everything right and to do
Yep.
it all. But to be really gentle with ourselves, and to your point about it could be 3 minutes. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes or even 15 minutes, but giving yourself just a few minutes to check in and to invite, not to demand, but to invite yourself to relax.
Right.
So thank you so much. Before we end the episode, what's the best way for people, if they like to learn more from you or to work together with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
Sure. My website is Shonda, Shonda Moralis, Moralis.net. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. If you go to my website and sign up for my email newsletter, I have a ton of free resources, guided meditations, guided coffee mindful breaks, a menopause resource guide, about a dozen free resources. So yeah, I'd love to connect with people.
I will be going onto that site and signing up for the newsletter immediately after we end our time together. So, Shonda, I really appreciate you taking the time to be a guest here today. And I've found what you shared to be really supportive. So, hopefully, this lands for even just one of our listeners or viewers. So, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Courtney. It was great to be with you.
My pleasure. Thanks.